Hey everybody, Lawrence here with Dirty Basic Terrain, coming at you with another one. Now, not too long ago, I built some Maggot Golems. And the whole idea behind them was that they were like guardians for a Necromancer. Because, you got lots of body parts, so there's lots of maggots, so we made golems out of maggots. I don't know, it worked at the time. But then I got to thinking, it's like, well, doesn't a necromancer need a place to actually do his thing and build his creations? So what I did was I came up with a necromancer's tower. Yeah, I know you don't exactly want to advertise if you're a necromancer, but if you're a very good necromancer, a tower is just fine. But I kind of went a little overboard with skulls and how tall this thing is. But this thing comes in at 19 inches tall and 9 inches wide at the very bottom base. But as you can see, it got a little overboard with the skulls. But I want to run you guys through how I made this. But before we get to that, I want to give a big shout out and thank you to my patrons: Dungeon Matron, Mia Geek, Quarel, Sykes, and Rick Spotton. Your guys' help every month is greatly appreciated, and it makes putting these videos out a lot easier, especially with buying supplies and stuff. And I can't thank you guys enough. So, all right, let's get to it. Okay, now here I'm using a skull mode that I got from Teemu. I think it's like for candy or stuff like that, but I'm using plaster. Yeah, I sprayed it down quick with a mold release. You can make your own mold release with some jet dry and water, but and now I'm mixing up some dental plaster and some water. You can use plaster of Paris for this, and that's just fine, but I'm using Merlin's Magic dental plaster because it's what I had on hand. But the thing about it, if you use plaster of Paris, add some like black ink to it to gray it up, because I'm using a dark gray plaster. But if you add some black ink to it, it'll be gray like this, and trust me, that's a good idea. And you can see I simply poured it in, and now I'm just scraping all the excess off into the further down molds. I could have mixed up enough to fill up the whole tray, but that would have been a whole big mess, and I didn't really feel like dealing with that. So I'll get some partial cast. And 15 minutes later, I can actually pop this out because I used the Merlin's Magic. And I've got a bunch of skulls. Now I have to do this over and over and over again, and that can get annoying, but I'm doing other stuff while I'm waiting for the plaster to actually harden up. But it's like 15 to 20 minutes for the Merlin's Magic. But again, that plaster of Paris will take a lot longer, but still, I mean, it's a cheaper alternative. But I will put a link in the description to where you can get Merlin's Magic. It's just my preferred method, and I know Herstar's mold, that's preferred. Now I got to start cutting out the base, the actual floors to the tower, and I'm just using this circle jig I got from Shifting Lands, and I'm using some 3-inch thick foam. You can use thinner foam and just pile it on top if you don't have access to the 3-inch, and that'll do just fine, because this is all going to get covered up, so if there are seams, it's not that big a deal. And you see, I cut successive layers a little bit, like maybe a ½ inch thinner, just so it has like an upside down cone effect almost. Now that I've got the layers all cut out, I want to start cutting out some columns. And these columns I got from Dungeons by Hands. It's a pretty simple process. Just cut out a blank to fit inside the jig, and then just make sure you slice away the edges, and you're going to get a nice little column after a minute or two of cutting. Pretty quick, pretty simple, pretty easy. And there you go, column. Now, I want to cut these columns in half because I don't want the whole column sticking out. I want to stick this up against the wall of the tower. So I kind of eyeballed a bit, got it as even as I possibly could, and just started slicing all the columns I have in half. And this is actually a good method for putting columns against the wall. And now I'm actually cutting them in half again, lengthwise, because I only you'll see later on the process why I do this. I don't need full size columns. I only want partial These are more going to be for a decorative element on the tower. At least that's what I'm telling myself as I'm doing it. Now, I'm trying to get my hot wire at, I think it was a 50-degree angle, or 40, 45. I want to cut it at an angle. So I'm just adjusting it to the right angle. I'm using that compass there, or a protractor, whatever it is. I forget. Brain fart moment. But just adjust the wire so it cuts at an angle, because I also want to do this for a decorative element. The bottom part of the columns are cut at an angle, just to make it look more visually interesting. Now that I've got them all cut, I want to make like the column part and the top part of the columns look like separate pieces. So I'm just using this massively expensive number 2 pencil, massively expensive carving tool to put a line in. And here, of course, I'm actually getting ready to start gluing them together. Now, yeah, this is black hot glue. Go ahead and use your clear hot glue. I just like to use black because it shows up on camera. And I'm just sticking the layers together. And you saw that I circled it. That's just to keep it even. Okay, now I need to carve out a curve in the back of the column pieces there, so when I put them up against the tower, they'll actually sit kind of flush. So for each layer, because the curve is going to be slightly different, I'm going to measure out pieces or kind of eyeball and just trace a little bit of a pattern so I can be able to cut it out later and have pieces for each layer that will fit right. And I am marking them according to which floor of the tower it is, so it makes it easier for me for later. And just use my hot wire and use that line I made, and then boom, done. And just do that over and over. Takes a bit of a steady hand, and I might have to do a little cleanup, but this will make these column pieces fit flush against a curved surface, so that's why I'm doing this. Now I need to start attaching these column pieces. And just using my hot glue again, and just kind of attaching it and test fit, get an idea. It's like, okay, this is on. Now I have to actually kind of, sort of, in a way, try and get it as even as possible, which I fail at, but you see I mark it, test fit it, and then slap hot glue. And I have to do this 6 times for each floor of the tower. Okay, now I need to cut some fingers, and you can see I had a skeleton hand, and right now I'm just kind of cleaning up the hands because these were cheap Halloween decorations, and I'm just scraping off the mold lines. But this is just a matter of trying to clean up as best as I can until get them ready for when I paint them. Now I want to trim off the bombs a little bit because I'm going to be inserting them into the very top of the tower, just to kind of give it a cool giant bone finger effect. And I'll press one in just to get an idea of where it's going to go, and I'm going to cut out a small hole using a blade, and just kind of digging it out and getting it ready. Test fit again, see if it's how I like. And if it's close enough, kinda. So I'll just slap in some hot glue and jam it in. And now let's start gluing on some skulls. No, I'm test placing these prior to actually gluing them down to make sure they're spaced out kind of evenly. I don't want to, start gluing in, and then find out, oh, I don't have enough space. As you can see here, I'm kind of getting an idea of how I'm going to be placing them later, just to get an idea so it doesn't look like, garbage. Get them test fit, and then just start hot gluing them in. And turned out to be a long process because there were a lot of skulls that I had to add to this. But put on a good video to listen to on YouTube or podcast or something, and it goes by a little bit quicker than you think. have to make up some texture paste. I'm just using some wall filler or spackle or whatever you want to call it, wherever you're at. And this is pink. Normally it's white. This stuff just dries. Starts out pink, and when it dries, it's white. It was what was at Walmart. That's why I grabbed it. It's just a matter of filling up a tub. I think this was leftover container from a Chinese takeout. I had some, it was egg drop wonton soup. That's what I usually get. But add some PVA to it, and I'm going to add some dark gray paint just to color it up some, and just stir and mix and turn. This stuff is stiff when you first start out. Now, I didn't add a whole lot of the PVA because add it in small amounts and mix. Yeah, it's going to be tough to stir, but you don't want to make it too watery. And that's exactly what I did. I added too much. So I'm going to add a little bit more of the wall filler, spackle, again, whatever you want to call it, and just keep mixing, because at this point, I'm not exactly sure how much I'm going to need. So I think I wind up mixing up almost a full container. Well, you'll see in a minute, but it's just a matter of stir, 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 stir. Your wrist will hurt afterwards. And here I'm just using an old beater brush and just basically painting on the paste that I just made. Now, the reason I'm just kind of slapping it and leaving little, all this different texture and stuff into it, because my thinking when I was doing this is I wanted this tower to have a rotted flesh feel. I didn't want it to be like pure stone, you see a lot of towers and stuff. I wanted this to just look like it's rotting. I want it to have a very fleshy, rotted feel to it. So I'm just leaving all these different textures and whatnot just to give it a really gross and disgusting feel. And this process took a while to do, but again, I put on YouTube videos. I also did a chunk of this while I was doing the Wednesday craft along on Dungeon Matrons Discord. So, that's if you have a long, semi-tedious process that you have to do with the build, just watch a video, talk to people, it's it's not that hard to make a semi-tedious task just fly by. If you can do something else, like have a video on the background or whatnot. And be honest, this process was tedious. I mean, to be blunt, it was. Okay, now here I'm grabbing off of a pre-prepared stack of thinly cut XPS, a chunk of foam, and I need to make a door. And that's why I had a mini there. I need a doorway for the first floor of the tower, just because I thought it would look right. I'm just kind of eyeballing the arches, making sure I get the center where the two different doors open up, and just really trying to get a good feel on the arches of the door, because I didn't want to go for straight, square doors. I just wanted to have that arch because I thought it would look better for the size that they were going to be. And once I'm happy with how the arches look, I'll cut it off. I'm going to grab my plastic grout brush and then just texture it out, because they're going to be wooden doors. I'm not going for steel or anything like that. Just straight up wooden doors to use my pencil to carve in the separation and make it look good. And now I'm just grabbing some PVA and I'm just smearing it all over the back of the doorway, and I'm going to slap it onto this cardstock that I got out of where did I get? Oh, I got out of a box of canned cat food. You can use cereal box or whatnot. This is just to give it a sturdy base that I can work on, because with all the texturing, it's going to be delicate. Quite simple, quick, easy, done. Now, I'm also grabbing a pair of scissors and just cutting it out, because I was like, yeah, I want this to be a little bit thicker, so I'm just going to double up on the cardboard, which is fine, and just smear it all over again, and then put it on a second layer, and then I'll kind of use the scissors to trim it out again. While I'm waiting on the glue to dry, I'm going to carve using, again, this massively expensive #2 pencil carving tool. I'm going to carve in the plank lines, because I don't want like a solid piece of door. I want the individual planks. I much prefer this method to making doors than individual strips, because I don't have to fit anything together. And right there you go. Easy peasy. Now, I need to make metal banding. I have this ultra thin foam that I pre-prepared, and I'm just cutting out some straight strips, and I'm going to use it for the metal banding on the door. This is not a difficult process, and I'm not even really measuring. I'm just using the ruler there as a guide for the blade, because I cannot cut a straight line without some help. I got my strips ready for the banding, and now I'm going to make it sure, yeah, that's close enough. Just kind of, actually, most of this is just eyeballing and cutting the strips, and I want to cut a little corner into it, just so it's, you know, it stretches across all the different planks, but they don't meet together. So I cut a tiny little bit off there, and as you can see, metal banding on the top ones, I have to cut a little angle to it. It's not hard to do this. It's just a lot of test fitting and eyeballing. It's like, you don't have to be super precise, because you don't. Then I got the metal banding glued on. I'm just trimming away the cardboard because it's now dry. And just following along the foam, trying not to cut it desperately, and trimming it up. Now, I had to bend it a little to fit the curvature of the first floor there. It's not that really hard. And now that I got it kind of got it right, I'm just going to slap a bunch of glue on and slap it onto the base. Not really difficult or overly complicated here. Now I have these little strips of foam that I originally intended to use for timber for different buildings and whatnot. These were pre-prepared. I got a box full of them. But I was like, this would be quick and easy way. And I'm just kind of rounding off the corners with the emery board here, just to make them round it off. But I figured I could use them to do a stone doorway, the doorway itself, not the door, but the doorway itself. So I'm just going to glue them in place here, paint down a bunch of glue, and being that it's foam and it's relatively thin, it's very flexible, so I can bend it in. But to hold it in place while the PVA is drying, I'm going to need some pins. I didn't want to use hot glue, because if I made a mistake in the placement, then I would be stuck, and it might cause more damage than it's worth. So I just went with PVA and pinned it in place to allow it time to dry. And I have to do the same with the other one. Now I have to trim where they meet, which unfortunately I didn't film, but just trimming it at a proper angle, and it's pretty easy. And I'm going to do the same process with this side that I did with the other side, and just use PVA and bend it, put it in place, and then use some pins and to hold them in place. I decided while I'm waiting for the glue to dry, I'm just going to carve in some stone lines for individual pieces of stone. Started off with a fondant sculpting tool. It's like, go back to the pencil. And it's just a matter of carving in lines. Pretty simple. Just eyeballing it, make it kind of even, whatnot. But yeah, just carving in lines to represent individual stone pieces. Now I'm grabbing a cobblestone texture roller, and I'm just using another, I have lots of pre-prepared pieces, so I don't have to stop and just rolling out some cobblestone onto a piece of foam. And I am going to glue that cobblestone piece onto the top here because I wanted the top to have a cobblestone look to it. Don't ask me why, I just thought it looked cool. I thought at the moment, it's like, yeah, why not? That, and I paid for the roller, I'm going to use it. And I did trim it to a circle just to fit a little bit better. Now that I've got all my texture paste and all my skulls on, it's time to primer this baby up. I would have used Mod Podge on this, but I didn't want to lose any of the detail in the skull, so I went with the airbrush. And I said just black primer and getting everything. So I figured, this would be the better route to go, because the Mod Podge, you could definitely use Mod Podge on the exposed foam and then use a rattle can on the rest, and that would work just fine. But the airbrush is in arm's reach of my crafting area, so that's what I went with. I said just a base coat of black. Now I made a template of the Awaz rune just because I'm going to eventually be carving it into all of the column parts, which this is something I should have done prior to priming, because then I wouldn't have had to do it now and then prime over top afterwards. But I'm just using a marker and drawing it on right now just so I have a guide for when I do carve it in, because I want them all to be even and the same size. So that's why I made the template just to put this so everything is uniform, at least as uniform as stuff gets for me. But the reason I went with this rune is because couple of things it can represent is death, rebirth, transformation, which I thought it was a perfect symbol to put on Necromancer's tower. And of course now, once again, that massively expensive number 2 carving tool pencil. I'm using that just going along the lines that I made and carving in the symbol into the stone instead of just drawing it on to make it looked like it was carved into the stone. And now that I went and primered over all the columns, I'm giving everything a zenithal highlight with a gray, because I intend to use a lot of washes in this, so I want to use the zenithal highlights just to make it the shadows and stuff, just to make it pop a little bit better. But again, and now that I got the gray, I'm doing a higher zenithal highlight with a white spray. Again, you could do this with rattle can, but I use the airbrush because it literally is within arm's reach of me. Not even a full length arm, but it's just almost like a slap chop method. Black, gray, white. Pretty simple, pretty easy, but I'm doing it zenithal style with the airbrush. Now I want to first start working on the skulls, and I'm just using a homemade dark brown wash, and I'm going to hit them all. I know it used to be you could just primer like skeletons and hit them with an Agrax Earthshade, but this is about as close as I wanted to get to that. But this is a homemade wash. I'll put in a link in the description to how to make your own washes, but it's pretty simple, and it's a little bit light, so I eventually do have to do 2 coats to get it to the darkness that I wanted it to start off with. But again, this is kind of tedious, but you also, as I've mentioned before, put on a video or a podcast and just go to town. Now I'm starting off with Sun-Kissed Peach here. I want to make a semi-rotted flesh color, just like death. But I didn't want to exactly go to my speed paints or anything because they're not cheap. So I'm just kind of mixing green, like the flesh cut, the Sun-Kissed Peach with some greens and different colors. And yeah, I know orange, but that does actually work. But again, it's just mixing it till I get to the point where I think, yeah, that looks like dead flesh. There is no real rhyme or reason or any specific recipe for this. This is like a one-time use color that it'll stay on my table of custom mixed colors till it dries out, and then I throw it out. And now I'm just painting on that flesh color that I just made, and all over everywhere that has the textured like flesh that I just from the paste that I put on. And this can be a bit tedious, but again, I know I keep repeating myself, but I listened to a lot of videos on this with this build, but I'm just trying to get it anywhere where that texture paste what I had placed in between the skulls on top here. When it was around the skulls, it was a bit tedious trying to keep it off, trying to keep this color off the skulls because there were so many of them. But again, this is just kind of I was going for a rotted flesh color, and it's a bit bright, and I will fix that later. So, but again, it's flesh. And now I'm actually adding like a brownish red color to it. It wound up being a lot brighter than I wanted, but again, I can fix that later. Give it like a bloody, nasty look to it. It looks bright on camera, but in person it was actually pretty good. I got new lights, so I'm still adjusting them. But again, this is just putting on a wash. Honestly, it's a pretty simple process, and I thought it looked good. Now at this point, I'd already hit all the stone areas with a dark gray, and now I'm just doing an overbrush with a medium gray. And do dark blue gray, pewter gray, and then in the next step I'll use granite gray. But right now I'm going to do a highlight dry brush, a little bit of a heavy-handed dry brush here, because it'll be a good chunk of this will get muted with, but it's just anything that's stone is getting a granite gray or a light gray dry brush. Okay, now I'm basically going to give the whole thing a wash in a dark brown homemade wash. Again, I'll put the link in the description, but the stone, the flesh, because I just kind of wanted the flesh to be kind of nasty and dirty. Nastier and dirtier than it already looked. But again, this is pretty easy. I mean, it's just wash it. And it adds more to the shadows and it makes it look disgusting, honestly. I mean, it straight up makes all that flesh parts look dirty, nasty, rotten, and disgusting. And then here's the part where I'm going to paint the door, and I realize, oh, I should have painted the door before I gave it the wash. But, oh well, c'est la vie. And now I'm using my standard wood colors, dark brown, medium brown, and a light brown. And right now I'm just giving all the wood 100% coverage. Not really trying to avoid the metal banding and where the door handles go, but like if you get it a little bit, it's not that big a deal because it's gonna be covered. You're gonna repaint those little bits anyway, so it's kind of like whatever. But again, 100% coverage here, or as close to 100% as you can with a dark gray or dark brown. And of course, for the brown, I'm going with a medium brown, just to overbrush, leaving the all the dark recesses alone. A lot of the texturing and where the planks are separate. You don't want to get paint down into that because it just leaves shadows, and this is like to help differentiate everything. And of course, light mocha or tan or light brown, just doing a quick dry brush to make all the little spots pop even more than they already do, and just to make, like I said, make it pop. Now I'm going to use a copper color and paint all the metal banding and the door handles quick, and because I like that the copper color, kind of this copper that I use kind of is close to bronze, so it's whatever. I just think it looks cool, so that's what I'm using. Now for all the skulls, I need to dry brush them quick because I want them to be a little bit more bright and to stand out again. Well, the wall of skulls make the skulls stand out, but I'm using I think it's a desert sand. It's like a very light tan color. So I'm just dry brushing the skulls and just to make them pop a little bit more from the dark dingy crud from the wash that I had put on earlier. Now I'd already hit the door with a wash and it's dry, so I'm just going back with the light mocha and dry brushing again to make all the texture and whatnot pop a little bit better. Pretty quick and easy. And now I'm using antique parchment, which is yellowed white slightly, and just highlight dry brushing all the skulls around the edges of the eyes and the mouth and whatnot, and just to make them pop even more than they already did. And now I'm using a dark brown, almost black homemade pigment powder to add shadow and dirt underneath the edges there of all the column pieces that I put on. And afterwards I'll seal it in with a light misting of IPA. And I cannot complain of how this looks. I am really, really happy. This turned out better than I had hoped. This is going to look great on the table, and I'm very, very happy with how it turned out. It looks disgusting and creepy, which was the goal.
Hey everyone, if you made it this far, it means you watched the end. As always, I really do appreciate it. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up. If you want to see more, click subscribe. I don't put it out on a regular schedule, so hit the bell notification if you want to get notified when I do put a video out. Also, I'm doing live streams on a weekly basis. I was doing them on Fridays, but now I've decided to move them to Saturdays. So Saturdays, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is when I'll be doing live crafting from the basement. So if you guys want to catch up, coming along Saturdays, just whatever random thing you want to say to me, go right ahead. But also, if you want to post pictures of stuff you build, and trust me, I would really like to see what you guys are building, come to the Discord, link down in the description, and post away and ask anything. Again, I would love to see what you guys are building. I need ideas. But again, this tower it took me a while to build, a couple weeks to build, but I am really happy with how it turned out. It's gross, it's disgusting, and it definitely screams undead. But again, as always, guys, when you're building your terrain, tower, whatever you want to build, remember, there's only one person you got to worry about, and that's you. Because it's your terrain.